All right, hello everybody. Welcome back. The title of this video, Islam hinders the intellect. Islam dulls the mind. Islam prevents people from thinking clearly. That's the concept I'm trying to convey. I realize a lot of people may consider that abrasive or offensive. It's not intended that way. It's just honest. Judged from the comments here on my channel, as well as other Islamic channels, Islamic websites, debates, personal conversations with Muslims, etc., they're blinded by their own ideology. It prevents them from seeing the world clearly, from seeing other religions clearly, including Christianity. There are numerous reasons for this. I've talked about some in previous videos. For centuries, Islam, a lot of times violently has resisted criticism. And so if you don't engage with criticism, if you just isolate yourself from it, you're not going to know how to deal with the legitimate criticism that filters through the cracks. That's been happening a lot lately in the Islamic world: text criticism of the Quran, historical criticism, source criticism, etc. Muslims don't know how to deal with it because they've been largely isolated from it. So that's one example of how Islam isolates itself from criticism and prohibits Muslims from thinking well about the religion. Another example is that Islam discourages asking questions, right? Don't question the Prophet. Don't question the Quran. And depending on how strict you adhere to your school of jurisprudence, that can be considered a form of apostasy, or at least a precursor to apostasy under Sharia law. Another way that Islam hinders the intellect is that it's a very pervasive religion. A friend of mine was over recently and he grabbed a couple of volumes of Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim off the shelf at random and just started flipping through them. And he remarked on how the most minute details are preserved about what Muhammad supposedly did, what he said as he walked up a hill versus walking down a hill, that he slept on his right side in the mosque, how he bathed, etc. Whether he was standing up or sitting down when he would pee. All of these absurd details are supposedly recorded, and the intent, obviously, is that is the Sunnah. That is what Muslims are supposed to do. So when a religion pervades this one's mind to that extent, it becomes difficult to see the world without those Islamic glasses on. Now, I'm going to kick this video off with a video that someone sent me, a Muslim, and this will demonstrate very clearly that Islam hinders the intellect, prohibits people from thinking clearly. Now, it's only about a minute long, a minute 25 long. We're going to watch it a bit fast, like 1.25x speed, just to get through it a little more quickly. So here we go.
And then a few verses later it says, "And he, the Spirit of truth, will not speak of himself, but what he hears he shall speak, and he shall guide you unto all truth." Now I have a Muslim audience in front of me right now. If I ask you, what did Jesus mean in that verse, who would he be referring to? Muhammad. If I ask a Christian, they wouldn't bat an eye. They would say that is the Comforter, the Holy Ghost, right? So he's saying the Holy Ghost is coming, this Trinity, God the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, these three in one. There's not three, but they're the same. So I'll tell the Christian, well, let's read the verse with clarity so that we're clear on your position, right? Jesus is God, God the Father is God, and the Holy Ghost is God. If we read the verse with just simplicity, we say God said to the Jews. He said, it's expedient for God to go, for if God does not go, God will not come. But if God goes, God will send God unto you. Then later it says, and God, the Spirit of truth, will not speak of God's self, but what God hears, God shall speak, and God shall guide you into all truth.
Okay, so this guy mentions the Trinity specifically, and then he goes on to rephrase a verse with God a bunch of times. God this, God that. And then he talks about how, the Christian theological perspective is incoherent. Well, it's not a problem with Christian theology. It's a problem that he doesn't know the difference and this goes for the majority of Muslims as well. They don't know the difference between Unitarian monotheism and Trinitarian monotheism. And so they'll critique Trinitarian monotheism from questions or with questions posed from a Unitarian theology. And that's exactly what this guy does. He replaces God with everywhere in the verse that he can to make the verse seem incoherent. But he just mentioned Trinitarian monotheism. And then he critiques it from a Unitarian monotheistic perspective, okay? That is to not know the difference between a theological circle and a theological triangle. All right, if you don't even know the basics of theology, you don't even know the difference, how to delineate in your mind between the two, then don't talk to me about theology. Don't talk to me about clear thinking, because this is exactly the opposite. Muslims do this all the time. Let's think of another very frequent objection. If Jesus was God, when Jesus prayed, did he pray to himself? Okay. Muslims advance this in criticism of the Trinity, but the question is Unitarian, okay? Jesus is not the Father, and that is what the question is getting at. If Jesus is the Father, when he prayed, did he pray to himself? Well, Trinitarian monotheism does not say that Jesus is the Father, so there's no problem. But again, the question is only a good objection from the Islamic perspective, because it's advanced from a Unitarian monotheistic perspective, and they don't even realize the difference. Islam prohibits people from thinking clearly. Let's think of another one. When Jesus said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" If Jesus is God, did he forsake himself? Again, that question is only a good objection if you're critiquing Trinitarian monotheism from a Unitarian perspective, which itself is an incoherent methodology. It's not a problem with the theology, it's a problem with the question. And it's a problem with the Islamic worldview that clouds the vision of Muslims, that clouds the cognitive abilities of Muslims, that they actually think that these are good objections. So, I thought to myself, how can I make Muslims see what they're doing is so incoherent? Well, the only apparent way to me is to treat Islamic theology and the Quran like Muslims treat the Bible and Christian theology. If it's one thing that all biblical exegesis has in common in the Muslim world, it's that it doesn't make any sense to anybody but themselves. So, I'm going to treat the Quran and Islamic theology like Muslims treat Christian theology and the Bible. I'm going to force my theology and my reading into Islamic theology and into the text of the Quran. So let's see how this works. Here I am, just a Christian one day, hypothetical Christian out there wanting to study Islam. And I'm going to force my worldview on to the religion of Islam while I'm doing this. And so I pick up, Sahih al-Bukhari one day. And I'm just reading through Sahih al-Bukhari, and I come across hadith number 2731. And I see, by Allah, whenever Allah's messenger spitted, the spittle would fall into the hand of one of them, i.e. the Prophet's companions, who would rub it on his face and skin. Interesting. Now, I'm wondering what the Islamic Trinity is, because I'm a Christian, Trinitarian monotheist, and I'm going to force my view on Islam. And I'm not going to realize the error of my ways. And I'm wondering, what is the Islamic Trinity? Well, here we have a man, Allah's messenger, who was not treated like a mere man. He was not treated like a mere prophet. When he would spit, his companions would catch it and rub it on their faces and skin. How many Muslims are devout enough, are pious enough to do this today? If you're a Muslim watching this, would you catch the spit and rub it on your face and skin? This messenger is being treated much differently than a mere man or a mere Rasul would be treated. But then I noticed something else throughout the hadith collections as a whole. Allah's messenger, whenever you have that those two words, there's this little Arabic inscription. Sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Interesting. But Allah, the name of Allah doesn't get that. The name of Allah is not venerated like the name of Allah's messenger. That's interesting. So you have this guy whose followers, catch his spit and rub it on their face, and his name is venerated more than the name of Allah. I wonder if Allah's messenger is the second person of the Islamic Trinity. Oh, so I go to the Quran, and I read the first phrase of Surah 33:56. Lo, Allah and His angels shower blessings on the Prophet. Surah 33:56. But I'm more of an academic-minded Christian, and so I'm going to look at the Arabic behind this word blessings, and so I do. And I see that the lemma is salah. Wait, that sounds like prayer. But that would mean Allah and His angels shower prayer on the Prophet, which would mean Allah is praying to the Prophet. Well, that would certainly mean that this Prophet is the second person of the Trinity. If God, Allah, if the God of the Quran is praying to Him, but I'm going to dig in a little bit more. I'm going to look up this lemma, salah, in the Quran. It occurs 12 times, and it's translated pray or prayer. Interesting. I look up the lemma in an classical Arabic dictionary, and it means prayer. But I'm going to go a little bit further. I'm going to look up the root, SLW, in the Quran. It occurs 99 times in 90 verses, and they're all translated pray, except for Surah 33:56. It seems like the translators are covering up something here, that Allah is praying to the messenger. But then I find a translation that doesn't. Surely Allah and His angels shower serenity, parentheses, literally, shower prayers on the Prophet. And that's Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud Ghali. Now, he's a PhD from Al-Azhar University. I know you're surprised, a PhD from Al-Azhar with the first name Muhammad. Suppress your surprise, let's move on. He actually gives the literal translation. It's prayers. Okay, that settles it for me. You have this man whose followers would catch a spit, rub it on their face. His name is venerated more than the name of Allah in the Hadith, and Allah in the Quran prays to him. That does it for me. This messenger, this prophet, that's the second person of the Islamic Trinity. What about the third person? Who's the spirit? Oh, well, that's easy. That's the jinn. Muhammad had a special jinn, remember? Muhammad's jinn was a Muslim jinn. So that's pretty simple. There's your Islamic Trinity. But we have a problem. Because Surah 6 in the Quran says that God does not have a consort. Some translations read wife. God does not have a wife, a companion, a consort. But Muhammad is the second person of the Islamic Trinity. And he had up to 13 wives, and one of them was notoriously young. God doesn't have a wife, but Muhammad had a wife. There's a blatant contradiction in the Quran. Let me jump on the closest Islamic YouTube channel and show Muslims this contradiction in their Quran. Now, is this absurd from the Islamic perspective? Well, largely, yeah. There are some valid points. I mean, it clearly says that Allah prays to Muhammad. But as a whole, is what I've just done, is my exegesis of the Quran and the Hadith invalid? Yes. Why? Because I'm forcing my own theology and my own readings into the text. What's the difference between me doing this and a Muslim doing this to the Bible and Christian theology? Well, here's the difference. I can see that I am performing eisegesis, that I'm reading into the text, and I can see that I'm forcing my own theology onto the Islamic religion. Muslims can't. They can't see this, and this is why they engage in these ridiculous arguments that Muhammad is in the Gospel of John or Deuteronomy or the Song of Solomon. Give me a break. The only reason they can think this is that Islam clouds the mind, it clouds the intellect, it impedes their cognitive functions. It requires them to conclude at the same point that they began, and that is seeing other religions, seeing the world through Islamic eyes only. It's so bad that they don't know the difference between Unitarian monotheism and Trinitarian monotheism. It's that bad. It's so bad that they don't understand when they're reading Muhammad into the Gospel of John or into Deuteronomy. It's appallingly bad. And it's not a fault of their intellect. It's not a fault of the Creator. It's a fault of the ideology that's so ingrained into their mind that has gone for centuries unquestioned and unchallenged. It's a fault of that ideology that they willingly hold to that clouds their intellect to their own peril.